The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
We need a revolution. There's only one solution. I need somebody to show me the love. We need a revolution.
Hello and welcome to Informed Life Radio on 1150 AM KKNW and streaming to CHD TV, Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you for joining us today. I know you have a lot of choices, so we're honored you're here. I'm your host, Lisa Templeton, and this hour of Free Speech Radio is brought to you by Informed Choice Washington, a nonprofit here in the state that started back in 2015. And it's our donors who keep this free speech on the airwaves and support all of our efforts standing for medical autonomy here in the state. We would sure appreciate your financial gifts to help keep this show on the air and do our other work. Please go to informedchoicewa.org and hit donate. And thank you so much. We really appreciate and rely on your help. And another way you can support the show is to always start your Amazon shopping from the link on our homepage. If you don't shop on Amazon, don't do it. But if you do shop on Amazon, if you'd kindly click that link on your way in, we'll earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of KKNW or CHD, and the information provided is not intended to be medical or legal advice. And I have kind of a big announcement.
And apologies for the slight delay as Lisa seems to have frozen up. We are just about to get ready to make an announcement on the show, but as far as getting her back into the program, we're going to kindly welcome our wonderful guest here. Chef James Berry from Pluck Food Seasonings will be our honored guest of the hour. He was on the show previously talking about organ meats and the highly nutritious benefits that they have, and he is back again. So welcome back, Chef James, and welcome back to Informed Life Radio. We're so glad to have you again here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I'm honored to come back. And I think it was funny, last time I was on the show, we had a great session with everyone, and then we ended, and then we all kept talking, and all this, I started sharing more information. They're like, "Oh, we gotta have another episode. You gotta share this with our audience." So hopefully we get to talk about all those things today, because we just want to bring as much value to your lives as possible. So please make sure, if you are with us live, that you're leaving comments and questions, because I am here to answer them and bring you as much value as possible.
Yeah, because I know whenever I see like organ meats on a menu, usually there's something that you look at and you sort of start getting some disgust. But, I come from a background where like Polish sausage or kishka and stuff like that, it's made with, like the blood of the meats and stuff like that is in there. And we also think of foods like scrapple, which kind of has the forgotten stuff from the meats, but it tastes so good. And so it is definitely not something that is to be disgusted about. It really is delicious. And with that said, Lisa is back on the show and reconnected here. So welcome back, Lisa. We were just finishing about the big announcement that you left a big cliffhanger on us.
Yeah. Oh, my apologies. I'm not sure where I left off, but that Bernadette said she might come back to be an occasional guest, and she invited me to
you should start, Lisa. You should start.
All we heard was you have a big announcement.
Yeah, we didn't hear anything. So you should.
Oh my
you should
gosh,
start from
you
the
guys.
beginning.
Oh boy, what a way to start off, huh? Thank you. Okay, all good things must come to an end. And after 6 years, the founder and host of the show, Bernadette Pager, is stepping away to pursue her vigorous advocacy in Tennessee and DC, and also to take some well deserved time to make sure she's keeping her cup full. And of course, we're going to miss her dearly. She said she might be back as an occasional guest, and she invited me to be your new show host. Like other situations before with Bernadette, such as meeting with legislators, that gracious lady took me under her wing and held my hand from the beginning, helped me build on my passion for medical autonomy to get my sea legs doing things I never imagined. For the show, she started by inviting me as a guest a few times. I don't know if you were with us then. Then she invited me to be her co-host every once in a while. Then Bob and I were co-hosting in her absence until I could ride this bicycle all by myself without any training wheels. And so I'm honored and excited to accept her invitation, and Bob will still join me sometimes to co-host. Everybody who knows Bernadette is fond of her because she makes you feel valuable and capable. That's not to mention her steadfast work over the years, making an immeasurable difference in our movement. People who never even know her will benefit from the work she's done and she continues to do. We all owe her a debt of gratitude, and we'll really miss her around here. So I will strive to fill those big shoes that she is leaving and continue to earn your viewership. Always invite your feedback at radio@informedchoicewa.org. Send me guest topics, suggestions, and other ideas you have. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks again for choosing to be here with me and Informed Life Radio. So, now I got to take a little breath. Now, if you were with us a couple of months ago, we had James Berry on. I got to meet James Berry, Master Chef, and I'm serious about that, in Salt Lake City in October at the Weston A. Price Annual Conference. He gave a talk there on organ meats. Plus, he came on the show, as I mentioned a couple months ago, to share this info with you. Now, today, he's back to remind us why organ meats are especially relevant. And he is going to help us put the pedal to the metal by offering some simple, practical tips for bringing them into our kitchen with confidence. James Berry is a professionally trained chef, nutritional educator, and speaker known for helping modern audiences reconnect with traditional nutrient-dense foods, especially organ meats. And his work bridges ancestral nutrition, modern convenience, and cultural food history. So welcome back, Chef James.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's truly an honor. Yeah, I'm excited to delve into the things we weren't able to cover last time I was here. It occurred to me there was a conversation that I had with someone actually at the Weston A. Price conference where we met, and I was just talking to someone else today, and I thought this is a conversation I should share because the result of what this person experienced to me says everything of what is kind of wrong or misguided around not only how we think about food, but also the current modern, food systems, our modern ag. So she was mentioning that she eats meat and she had gotten tested and she was low in B12. And anyone that's eating meat knows that that's one of the benefits of eating animal protein is that you get B12, and pretty challenging to get it any other way.
Okay.
Yet she was eating the meat and her B12 was low. And so her doctor said, well, why don't you try eating some organ meats? Now, what is interesting about this, they both have B12, but so why would you need to eat organ meats if you're already eating animal meat? And I think this is really the mindset that most people have is like, why do I need organ meats? I'm already eating beef.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute she started eating organs, her B12 went up. So what that highlights to me is two things. One is that the B12 is more easily absorbable from the liver.
From
Two,
the liver you eat, or
yeah, from the beef liver you eat, because that's how
okay,
her B12 went up. And
okay,
the other point that I think it makes is that right now the trend is eat lots of protein, animal protein. That's that. If you go on any social media, I mean, most nutritionists are talking about, health practitioners or even just influencers are talking about increasing your protein levels, particularly as you age. And you can see it playing out in all the grocery stores because everything's listing how much protein it has in it, right? So they're really
right, yeah,
playing into that idea. But what's interesting is if you're eating animal protein and yet you're not absorbing the nutrients, that is probably a sign that you are not digesting the protein properly, that it's not breaking down in your system properly. And that's usually a case of having low hydrochloric acid. And
okay,
what I think is fascinating is then you keep connecting the dots and you go, well, why would people have low hydrochloric acid? Well, stress, toxins, these are all things that affect, lack of sleep. These are things that affect your hydrochloric acid, your stomach acid. And then of course some of these pharmaceuticals that people are taking, whether it's Tums or anything like that,
right.
those are affecting your hydrochloric acid. They're not actually good for you in that sense. Like, you don't want to lower your hydrochloric acid. You want to, if anything, increase it. But because some people are eating a lot of ultra processed foods, then they have high acidity, and then they have the issues where they think they need a Tums, right? But ultimately though, it's a sign that we do live in a stressful world. We live in a high toxic world, and so most likely the majority of us have very low hydrochloric acid. So when I piece all these parts together, to me it says, well, yeah, of course we need to be looking then beyond just the muscle meat. We have to be looking not only for the good of the animal, for the humaneness of the killing the animal. We have to be looking towards the whole animal, but we have to just be looking beyond that mindset of like, well, I already get everything I need from the muscle, because it's not ancestrally how people would look at it. And clearly this one woman is an example of how it's not literally how the body receives it, that it's really about, it's not about one piece of the puzzle, like, oh, I just need to eat animal protein. It's about how is your body receiving the food that you're choosing to eat. So you have to look at the quality of the food you're eating, but then what is the environment that your body's receiving it in? And if you don't have the proper hydrochloric acid, you're not going to be able to digest it properly. It's just they go hand in hand. And I will add this
But
one other piece. I recently was interviewing two candidates from Kenya. One was from Kenya and one was from another part of Africa. And it was so interesting when I asked them, I said, so do you know about organ meats? And they said, well, yeah, of course. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we don't really look at it as organ meats. We just look at it as animal, because we eat the whole animal. It's all the same thing to us. And I thought, hallelujah, like that is beautiful. Like, that's the way it should be.
yeah, I remember one of Joel Salatin's books says that, we go to the store and we see all these chicken breasts, and maybe thighs and legs and maybe some gizzards, but he says there's so much more to the bird than those pieces we see in the store. And I'm sure with beef, it's even more marked.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the bird though, because to me that's a perfect example of why we need to think about the whole species, not just a part of it. Because even if you look at the chicken, so you have white meat, you have the dark meat, and of course you have more than that. But if we just focus on those muscle pieces, I think everyone knows that the dark meat is more nutritious. That when you talk about the two parts, it's like, well, they're both protein, but the the darker meat is more nutritious. And how they'll explain why it's more nutritious is because it's a muscle that works. The breast doesn't move much. When something
I
doesn't
didn't know
move
that.
as much, it doesn't have as much of a need for function. So it doesn't have as many nutrients to maintain the function. And so when you think of it that perspective, that is why not every muscle in the chicken has the same nutrition. That's the same as a cow. Like not every muscle has the exact same nutrition. But when you focus on an organ meat, well, it does have a job. There is no dormant, organ meat. It's there for a reason, and it's all functional. And so it has the appropriate nutrition to maintain the function of that organ. And right there, to me, that's yet another uh, argument towards, yes, we need to be focusing on the whole animal, because every part of that animal, particularly the parts that have function and movement, they are the ones that are going to be the most nutritious. And so that's not to say you only should eat them, but if you eat the whole animal, you're getting a more holistic, like functional nutrition from that animal versus just one subset of nutrition.
Yeah, and in proportions too. And you know what you said about the person you met from Kenya, was it?
Yes.
It shows us that it's really a cultural reaction that we've kind of learned, ew, icky organ meats, because it hasn't always been that way, and it's still not that way in other parts of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and it's something luckily more and more people are getting, um, keen to. I was in a conversation today with someone talking to them about supply chain, and I was kinda sharing with them my vision of how I really feel like we have to centralize, like, we have to take all the parts and try to get them together and create more, functional systems. So like taking the slaughterhouse, but then also combining that with the processing plant, combining that with the freeze drying plant, with the rendering of the fat, like basically turn the slaughterhouse into a complete, nose to tail factory where you are utilizing every part of the animal, including the hide. That is how
Mhm.
some slaughterhouses back in the day were made, but just these days, most of them don't. They don't utilize the whole animal. Um, so, but I was in this conversation with her, and what was really interesting was talking about this mindset that we have here, of how we're not eating these things. And I was mentioning to her, yeah, isn't it interesting how, like I was at a Wyoming slaughterhouse, and this specific slaughterhouse only uses about 51% of the animal. Now you would think the other 49 is going to pet food or some other industry, and it wasn't the case. They were actually throwing it out. And so I was mentioning to her, isn't it
To the
interesting how
dump.
our system is set up where we're throwing out 49% of that resource that's also in more cases than not the most nutrient dense part of the resource. Um, so what happens though is because we're not using that resource, what's happening is that we're then creating an industry, a supplement industry, to fulfill the needs that are missing from the American diet,
Mhm.
that we're not getting because we're throwing out that 49%,
Mm.
right? And so then what you have is you have an
Totally.
industry, the supplement industry in this case, that kind of doesn't want you to utilize the whole animal, because then they go out of business. I mean, I'm not saying it's not literally apples to apples, but point is that once you create an industry that is necessary, like it basically is a that it needs the system to stay disjointed, then that industry now doesn't want to cannibalize itself by helping that the other industry thrive. If that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of the argument people say about the American Cancer Society. It's like on a certain level, they say, "Oh, we want to cure cancer," but if they cure cancer, then they don't need
Mm.
to exist,
Right.
right? So on a certain level, like I think ethically, people, yes, they do want these things to happen, but on a business or corporate level, it's like, no, they don't, because if they do, then they're
Mm.
done.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so wasteful. That's so wasteful because you could think of, even if there's so many other uses they could take advantage of, the
Yeah,
organ
I
meats,
don't I don't think it's that
composting,
they
and like
don't
you said,
want
pet
to.
food.
I don't think it's that they don't want to though. I think just because it's their system is it's kind of more complicated. That once the system is established, their HACCP plan, just how they're structured, um, basically gets set, and to change it, it's very expensive, and they've got to see a reason to change it. Like they've got to have a clear path towards profit. So it's just kind of
Sure.
it's basically chalks up to just it's an antiquated system, and it's just not it hasn't kept up with the innovations that we're seeing, like with the freeze drying of organ meats and the products they're now
Oh
using,
yeah.
and other things like that.
Yeah, the topic of dysfunctional systems comes up a lot on this show. Okay, well, last time I know you were trying to help us get the organ meats underway and onto our dinner tables, and you had mentioned grating liver into ground beef. And what was the starter ratio you suggested?
Yeah, I was suggesting that you put a tablespoon of the grated liver into about a pound of any ground meat. It doesn't have to be beef. It could be turkey. It could be
Oh,
lamb.
true.
Yeah, literally anything, any type of ground meat. And you start with a tablespoon of grated liver and maybe go all the way up to 2 tablespoons once you've kind of getting acclimated to the taste. But typically, if you don't go beyond too far beyond, a fourth of a cup or even that eighth of a cup, you won't taste it, and the texture is the same.
Okay. And then I'll mention the other one that I recall you're telling us last time, and then maybe you have a few new ones for us. The other one you suggested as an easy starter one was chicken hearts because you said they're mild.
Yeah. Yeah, so really quickly, I'll just even recap the easing organ meats. And so in terms of what's available is you really just have either the fresh wet organ, or you have capsules. That's really your only main option. I created Pluck because I wanted a food-based option. I wanted something that wasn't a capsule, but I also didn't want I wanted to get over the hurdles of, sourcing, taste, cooking skills, all that kind of stuff. So I did create what I believe is the easiest first step, which is it's now in the form of a seasoning. The seasoning's got freeze-dried powdered liver, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas. You just salt your food as you would, and you could salt anything. You don't even need to know how to cook. You could salt your to-go food, right? So that's a very easy entry point. It's easy for kids as well,
Sure.
but in no way is that the end. Ideally, what we want you to do is start actually incorporating these parts of the animal into your diet. And so the grating of the liver is a good first step. You could also purchase pre-made ancestral or paleo blends. Those like there's a few different brands that do that. For the most part, those have like between 5 and 7% typically in them. So it's not an enormous amount of organs, and it's usually only liver and heart, but it's still a great start. And so I highly recommend doing that. And what's kind of
Okay.
fun with specific brands, they will have wild game as well. So you'll be able to get like an elk ancestral blend. You'll be able to get
Wow.
poultry ancestral blend. So you can really mix up the species. But for the most part, the easiest path with the organ is to keep it frozen when you buy it. That it's when it's defrosted that you just get overwhelmed. It's a large, piece of meat or organ, and and a lot of people are just like, I don't know how I'm going to eat all this in one sitting. So the more you can keep
Right.
it frozen, the better. And
Okay,
then
so you can just use little bits at a time.
yeah, little bits. And so the grading's one example, but another thing you can do is cut tiny, almost pill size pieces of the liver and just freeze those on a tray separately. Once they're frozen, then you can just put them in a bag or, a freezer container. Then you literally could just take a little piece every day and just little swallow it just like you would a pill. I don't prefer that method because I want you to chew. I want you to use your
Right.
senses when you're eating, but it's still that's okay. However you get it into your diet, I just want you to get it into your diet. I don't have a preference of how. I think I think it's more that we need to start doing it because the reality is food is very calorie rich, but it's just not as nutrient dense as it used to be.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
I would say that then the next stage is what you already mentioned, which is focus on the organs that are closer to muscles. So you have heart and you have tongue for if it's beef. Um, and then from there, I say you focus on species. So like if you're first stepping into like, hey, I'm gonna buy my first organ, great. Why don't you get chicken hearts because they're so mild? But you could also do the chicken livers. Another mild option for beef is calf liver versus cow, the actual adult cow. Um,
Oh, it's milder.
oh, much milder, and some people even think it's sweet. So that's a good choice as well. But what I love
Should you
about the
soak that first for
some people do, but I have found I've had some conversations with friends who are very acclimated to cooking and eating organs, and we both agree, like, when it comes to liver, it doesn't really change much. Like, we've soaked them in lemon, we've soaked them in buttermilk, and it doesn't really change the flavor much. I know some people think they're soaking it to remove toxins, but it's questionable how much you would actually remove, and
okay.
it's not, and the other piece as well is we're assuming that that organ is toxic, and they're not. It's more about the sourcing, how it was, raised, fed, how it was slaughtered even, a lot of people don't think about this. The animal is stressed out before it's slaughtered. The texture and taste of the meat changes from the, hormones that come into the meat from the stress.
I was just thinking of trying to get the blood out a little bit. Are there,
Well, the blood is
speaking of
drained.
tox,
That's actually a really
okay.
interesting point. By the time you get the product, the blood is drained. So when you get a part of the animal, whether it's muscle meat or not, and I didn't know this, I learned this through a friend of mine. Um, but basically, you'll see sometimes what looks like blood. It's not actually blood; it's hemoglobin. So it's basically the residual effect. It's what comes out of the muscle after the blood is drained. It's almost like it's not exactly the residual blood, but it's kind of the the part that is tied. I can't. I wish I could explain it better. I can't. But it's the hemoglobin. It's not the actual blood.
Okay. And are there any certain, I mean, I know maybe you could go through the ideal sourcing information, but for people who don't have that available or maybe budget is a consideration, are there certain ones that would be more conventionally raised that would still be useful, something you would use?
Yeah, it's a great question, and my answer may surprise some people. So first of all, every cow is grass fed to start. Every single cow, and they're all when they're little, they're all grass fed. They're for the most part pastured as well. I've been to the ranches. I've seen them. Um, it's expansive. They're treated very well, very humane, and it's only when they reach a certain age that then they either go to like a CAFO, a controlled, environment where it's in a pen or something like that, and they're in dirt and they're in not ideal situations, and then others go to pasture land and continue to be grass fed. So just everyone should know that if you are looking for grass fed, you should also be looking for grass finished. That thus you
Yeah.
should also be concerned if you see a beef and it just says grass fed. So it doesn't say 100% or
Mhm.
grass fed, grass finished, because if it just says grass fed, it's like, well, yeah, they all were. And
That's
there's
the
also,
default. Okay.
yeah, it's the default. So it's like, huh, okay. So it's questionable if that's accurate. There's also some weird regulations, and I am not the expert here, but friend, uh, CJ, or no, what, I'm now getting confused with a couple friends, but one of my rancher friends, it's like JC. He talks about how they basically are taking, as long as there's a certain amount of fat in the blends, and so when you see the ground meats that says 85%, protein, 15% fat, and 93.7, those kind of things, that they can legally
Hmm.
piece, like you could be getting hundreds of parts from cows
Mm.
everywhere, even from abroad, and they could be grinding them up to
Oh,
fulfill
wow.
that percentage of what it is. And so a lot of times you don't actually you could be getting, yeah, it might be grass fed, but it's coming from literally hundreds of cows, and they're all different variations of grass fed, because there's grass fed where you're on a pasture, and then there's grass fed where you're still in a bin, like, an enclosed area, and there's machines
Hmm.
just feeding, shoveling grass towards the cow. And so the industry can be
Hmm.
really tricky. So this is where my answer is going to get a little, I think, surprising for people. I believe that the benefits of eating organ meats are so important for the diet. I believe that all illness stems from some lack of nutrition, and that the organ meats are so beneficial that I vote for whatever you can afford, and
Mm.
whatever fits your lifestyle is better than not eating them.
Okay. That's a
Yeah,
great
and
rule of thumb.
here's the thing that's very interesting. There was a really great study that came out recently where it showed that certain grain-fed cows are just as nutritionally dense as some of the grass-fed. What matters is the location of where they're grass-fed, what type of grass they were fed. Is it a variety? Like, there's so many factors. It's not just black or white. It's
Mm.
not just like grain-fed, grass-fed. There's
Okay.
no such thing when you're dealing with a wild organism. So the seasons that during the time of year it was being fed, the grasses it was being fed, that those are going to be changing the nutritional value of that meat. And so ultimately, you do have circumstances where they're equal. If I were grading them, I would say, okay, when you can find it, yes, 100% grass fed. So grass fed, grass fed, pastured, on a pastured, regenerative, like, so that it's a farm that's working with the animals opposed to just trying to take advantage of the animals. Um,
Hmm.
any part of that, I would say, is, yes, that's the highest option, but it's also gonna be your most expensive, and if you can afford it, great. That would be the choice I would go with. But if, let's just say, you have a farm and it's local and they do grain finish, but you talk to them and they say, well, yeah, we don't use soy, it's non-GMO. We only do this because we personally find it tastes better. And we only do it for
Okay.
this many weeks. And they're literally transparently sharing with you what they do. Then why wouldn't you buy that? It's local, and as long as it tastes good to you,
Hmm.
like, do it. It's probably gonna be cheaper for you than going to your local store and buying that 100% grass-fed. So, find the system that works for you, but here's kinda the ending piece to this, is that if you go to an international store, you go to a Mexican store, you go to an Asian store, those are not
Hmm.
grass-fed animals, and yet every person shopping there is eating the organ meats to some degree. And you'll find nearly almost every part of the animal of other species as well in these markets, and
Wow.
they're still healthy, you know what I mean? They're eating it's not like they're sitting there and they're not
Okay.
healthy because of that. It's other foods.
Okay. Okay. And you would also establish a relationship with that local rancher if we went.
Agreed.
Could, it's important. Once people get their meat home, their organ meats, that is, what are the biggest mistakes that you see people making that lead to a bad experience?
Yeah, one is, I think, the whole freezing versus defrosting is, I think they defrost too much too fast. So they think like, oh, I'm going to use all. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to use the whole liver. You're not going to use the whole heart. They're huge, particularly if it's from a cow. They're huge. So first thing first
Okay.
is I would be realistic. I would get it home. One thing to note is that you could have beef muscle and it can be aged and it can last weeks. The organ meats are not like that. They actually need to be refrigerated. They can't be left out long. They will go bad even in the refrigerator quickly. So if you're not going to use them that night or
Okay.
even the next night, I would absolutely just freeze them. It's really key. It's one of actually the reasons in history wise why we kind of lost favor with organs in the US is there were two real points that happened. So one is when they centralized meat production, right around Chicago area, and then they started freighting it out to the coast. Well, the carts, this was in the early 1900s. So the carts, the freight carts were, they couldn't refrigerate them cold enough to include organ meats. So at that time, they
Okay.
started, freighting the cow or the animal out, already butchered, but they couldn't include organ meats. So now you have the coast and people in those other areas not getting any organs. And when they're not at the store, then you stop thinking about them and then you stop cooking them and you just start to lose your relationship with them. So that was one period of our time where we kind of started to lose favor with the organ meats. The other way I would say is after World War II. So during World War II, there was actually a fear of protein shortage, and the government actually did. They basically did they used people's tax dollars to do a campaign to encourage people to eat other parts of the animal. So they started calling the organ meats variety meats and changing the name so that it made it
Mhm.
more pleasing or interesting. They even coined the term meatless Mondays. That's when it started, was World War II. So they were
Oh.
actively trying to get people to eat less protein. And or I'm sorry, they were, yeah, less protein, but they were trying to get them to eat more of the other parts, and it worked. And that's why many people that generation grew up, being force fed liver and onions. However, once people got back from World War II, now you had, in more cases than not,
Mhm.
you had both parents working because the women were working while the men were away, and the men came back now, and women didn't want to stop working, of course. And so it's like now you had both people in the household working, and they had more income, and they were like, well, let's get the more expensive cuts because organ meats are cheaper. And so then we fell back into
Mhm.
this place of, oh, well, organ meats are poor people's food, and we're not poor. So those are two
Right.
big parts of why organ meats lost favor. And I think if anything, what you're seeing now is not necessarily a Maha trend of why organ meats are coming back into favor. It's not. I'm sure there's some people that are trying to take that credit, but I think it's more because we're recognizing that our modern diets are not sustaining us nutritionally, like that we are can one of the clearest signs of that is obesity. When you have a nutrient dense food, so when you're getting sufficient nutrients, your body tells you when to stop. You won't keep eating. It's when we're eating these nutrient void foods, that's when your body doesn't know when to stop. And of course there's other reasons as well, like these artificial or natural flavors that are tricking your system into the kind of like salty sweet vibe where you can't stop because it's triggering your taste buds and tricking your system. But mostly it tricks your system with the flavors because ancestrally flavor equaled nutrition. So when we taste
Mhm.
strawberry, our bodies ancestrally think, oh, I'm going to get nutrients. So if you eat a Pop Tart with strawberry flavor, there's no strawberry in there. That's all just artificial added flavors. Your body doesn't know that though, and it just won't stop. It just wants to keep eating that Pop Tart and eat more of them because it's waiting for that nutritional signal.
Okay.
And I can't even tell you how many times I get told when people start incorporating organ meats into their diet, they lose weight.
Wow. See, people, this is another reason. And tell me little bit more, it's pretty easy to find liver. Maybe it's sort of easy to find heart. And you also have pancreas and spleen in your product called Pluck. Did I
Yes.
miss any? Is it got
Uh,
four?
nope, five in it right now: liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. And
Oh,
we're
kidney.
really what we're doing with the five organs. Some people call it the complex, the organ complex. I mean, honestly, I would love to, add even more things to it. I really do believe if we can get as much of that whole animal into our diet, we will be better off. Like I'd love to add lung, I'd love to add other things. Lung is just very strong tasting. And so I'm struggling to
Mm,
really add that without it affecting the taste. Because as I mentioned earlier, like for me, pluck is a gateway. So if I make it taste too strong, then I'm not achieving the purpose of getting people into this style of eating. I'm trying to help shape people's palates, and if we ease into things, we can do that. But I know that if I just bombard you with that liver taste or the pancreas taste or the heart taste, you're gonna probably give up on it pretty quickly because we are creatures of comfort, and we really,
mm,
if you really boil it down, the things that become lifestyle are the things that are easy and delicious. Both has to be both.
mm.
But
Yeah,
rarely do we,
yeah.
if something doesn't fit both of those, will we make it lifestyle. We'll do it for a month, we'll do it for maybe a couple weeks, but we will not do it lifestyle. Um, so that is my mission, is to help people feel better in their bodies. And so I'm struggling to add lung, but what we're talking about when we're trying to get these organs into your diet is we're observing a very ancestral concept, which is like supports like. And I sort of touched on this earlier
Oh,
when I was
yeah.
talking about the species, about how the part of the animal that moves and has function is the one that's going to be more nutritious. Well, that's the concept of like supports like. The part that you're eating is going to support that part in you. And this is not just an opinion, like this is very science based. They've done studies since I think the 20s or 40s. um, Standard Process did studies on glandulars and showing how when you were missing that glandular, if you ate the animal source of that glandular, that it went to that part in your body and supported that part.
Mm,
So there's lots of studies showcasing this concept, but we also can recognize it in just looking at heart, for example. So anyone that's taking a cardiovascular supplement has probably heard of CoQ10. It's even in many versions of pharmaceutical heart supplements, or I guess pharmaceuticals. So CoQ10, or coenzyme Q10, is found in animal hearts. So it's in chicken hearts, it's in beef hearts.
wow.
It's part of that organ, and it's not in the liver. It's not in the spleen. It's only in the
Amazing.
heart.
Okay.
So that's a real example of, oh, well then, yeah, then that means me eating this heart's going to support my own heart, and it goes from there. If you eat the brain, it's going to support your brain. If you eat, and really, if you think about it, why do we eat the muscle? To support our muscles.
Okay. That's always so fascinating about like helps like. You were mentioning different flavors and seasonings, and what are a few simple techniques or flavor pairings like fats, seasonings, blending with other meats that can help make the organ meats taste good right away?
I find onion and garlic really help right away. And that's why they are in pluck. They really do help to offset those flavors. That's why liver and onions is very popular. Um, there's lots of things you can also add. There's, of course, anti-parasitic herbs. There's different things you can add, but that's not just an organ thing. I mean, you could be adding that to any ground meat, like oregano, thyme, rosemary is a good one. So,
Hmm.
in no way should you just be looking at it as a singular thing of like, oh, I'm just going to eat the liver. Like, find, you can really tune it to your preference. And that's why we even offer just pure. Pure is
Okay.
just 100% organ meat, because we're like, look, we can't make a seasoning for everybody. And so we'd rather once again, have you have access to getting it than not getting it. So you can just buy pure and then make it your own, add that to your seasoning. Um, but here's one tip as well is you when it's raw, so particularly with the liver, when the liver is raw, it's actually at its less stringent taste. So it's at its mildest taste when it's
Mm,
raw. So it's actually the cooking of it that makes it even more intense. So you really want to be mindful of not overcooking it, any of the organs if you do, because it changes the texture and then it of course increases that kind of metallic or that flavor that we find it so icky.
right. Okay. What's I'm wondering, well, I was gonna say how do you suggest preparing liver, but you've already warned us. Let's not just jump right in with a full-fledged meal of liver and onions.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you can, of course, I mean, I usually like to show people liver in three ways. So when I do like a cooking demo, I'll let them first taste it raw, and it's frozen
okay.
first, and so we're still letting them taste it just a very small amount raw and slightly frozen still. And then I cook it, but I cook it properly. So I leave it still where it's slightly just a little pink when it comes off the pan because it's going to keep cooking on the plate. That's residual heat. And then from there I take it and then I make it a pate. So I show them three ways: two on their own, one raw, one cooked, right, and then one where it's you got caramelized onions, you've got garlic, you've got cooked carrots or sweet potatoes, and you're just basically adding even more flavor to it, and of course butter as well in the pate. And what's so fascinating is that once people taste all the three ways, none of them leave saying, I don't like any of them. Every single time I do this, everyone likes at minimum one. The majority of people like all three. So it tells you
That
that
sounds.
most
Do you
people
put
are
the
not cooking it properly. Most people, the reason why they don't like them is because they they either have a mixed relationship with the person who cooked them when they were first introduced to them. So maybe there's
mm,
some trauma there. So it has to do with either the person who cooked it for them when they were younger, how they cooked it, and then the texture. That's usually why someone who has tried it doesn't like it. It's just because they didn't do it right.
yeah, and yeah. I'm thinking back to the liver and onions story in my family. I had good relationships, but just, the smell and it just, like you were saying, the metallic taste, and I'm sure it was overcooked, even though my dad was a really good cook. I think he overdid that one. Um, it- what's one simple shift you think that we haven't already covered that listeners could make right now to adopt that would meaningfully improve their nutrient intake? Obviously, I'm sure it will have something to do with organ.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting them into diet in any way. I have seen what people would deem miracles from people that start eating these parts of the animal. I see people
As
like,
far as health improvement.
yeah, health miracles, like where their skin issues go away, their hair and fullness increases, their sleep improves, their energy improves, their just stamina in general improves. So these new, like, I really go back to that. Every health issue stems from a nutrient deficiency in some way. The question
Do
is,
you?
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, James.
Oh, I was just going to say, so in my mind, then it's about how do we make sure that we're not just getting calories, but actually getting nutrient dense foods. And I think there is a lot of there's a lot of misperceived ideas. There's people think that they're toxic. There's so many things that can be true, but in more cases than not are not true. And for every
Okay.
animal that you think has X it's just not true. A lot of it is just the continued buy-in of the propaganda that's out there. The reality is
Mhm.
we are able to talk to each other because our ancestors ate these foods. The
Mm.
scientists, they looked back, they could tell that like our ancestors really didn't step into Homo sapien body until we had a couple things happen, and it all happened right around the same time. Fire, so where we could cook food, but also where we became a predator, and we were able to get three things when we became a predator, and that was blood, fat, and organs. And before we got those, we were still eating meat. We were still eating lots of vegetables or whatever, vegetation and whatever we could find, but we weren't getting the nutrient packed fullness that would support, the changes in our brain size and the changes in our digestive tract, all the changes that we now live in, which is Homo sapien.
Mm. Okay, we're almost out of time, but I'm going to consider that you are our pinnacle example for organ meat consumption. Do you have them like with every meal? Do you try to have three different ones a day, or what's your ideal? And then you can tell us where people can find you and pluck and what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of people talking, saying like, oh, you got to eat lots of, well, there's a couple things. They're either focusing just on liver and they're saying just eat liver and ribeye. And that
Hmm.
to me is missing the point. Like that basically what we're doing to organs is we're doing the same thing that we're doing to muscle meat, is we're trying to say like only eat one part of the muscle, like the ribeye, for example. Now we're just transferring that singularity concept to, oh, just eat liver. We do it to the chicken as well. Just eat chicken breast, or just eat the dark meat. Like we're constantly looking for that magic pill of like that, oh, just do this one thing and this will solve
Hmm.
everything. And it's just not true. We have to look at things from a holistic viewpoint. And for example, even people focus on liver, and it is definitely the multivitamin of nature. But for example, spleen, if you are someone who is anemic, spleen has more iron than liver. So this idea that the other organs aren't just as valuable is absolutely false. Pancreas has natural digestive enzymes in it. So there's lots of benefits we can get. I personally did not grow up eating these meats. I didn't learn to cook them until culinary school. And I really
Hmm.
didn't incorporate them until I became a father. And even now,
Right.
lifestyle kind of keeps me from really incorporating them as much as I'd like to. I just don't have as much time as I'd like to, because both my wife and I run our own businesses. So we don't have just one person managing the house, and making it so that we can take the time to do certain things. So I use Pluck, to be honest with you. I use it on every meal, and I use it significantly. I put a lot into it, and we even have a brain product. We have cinnamon brain, and I use that as well whenever I have a smoothie or anything else. And I just get it that way. But I guess the other ways I do it is I eat tongue sometimes. The lengua for tacos is fantastic. It's really easy. And then I would say probably chicken hearts when we're making like a sauce or something. I chop them up like mushrooms and I just throw them in. But that's kind of the scope of what I take the time to do at this stage. Yeah,
Okay. And just tell people where they can find you.
absolutely. Yeah, you can go to eatpluck.com. You can go to Amazon. I heard you mention that earlier. If you even use Informed Life Radio's link, they would get a cut of that Amazon purchase for Pluck, or you can go to our website and get it there. We have many flavors, and we have, as I mentioned, pure organ blend, and we have pure brain. So, and we're going to be offering other parts of the animal in the near future. So keep coming back, and you'll pretty much
Wonderful.
see as much nose to tail as we can get into your diet.
Thank you so much for being on our show, James. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. Thank you, Nathan, for all your work. This is your guest host, Lisa Templeton, signing off for the week. Here's to embracing your informed life, and goodbye from 1150 AM KKNW. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Informed Choice Washington is a nonprofit organization that advocates for healthy immunity, medical freedom, and fully informed medical consent. The right to make medical choices without coercion is fundamental to our civil liberties and a basic principle in all human rights declarations. To learn more, tune in each Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. to An Informed Life Radio and visit the website informedchoicewa.org. It's time to take a stand for medical freedom. Go to informedchoicewa.org today.
Did you know that solutions containing iodine can inactivate viruses in the nose and throat in 15 seconds? And hydrogen peroxide can do it in under 30 seconds. Decades of studies, including many conducted during COVID, have shown that properly prepared and used nasal spray and gargling solutions can reduce your risk of infection, reduce viral load, reduce symptoms, and reduce transmission of viruses. To learn more, go to healthyimmunitynow.org and check out the EFU Challenge. Why spread fear and infection when nature provides solutions? Go to healthyimmunitynow.org today.
The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.